Welcome, Sleepy Gamers. Today we're going to be taking a look at another Don Lemon interview with Shaniqua McClendon. I'll let Don introduce her. They're going to be talking about strategies to help Biden win back young voters. And something I'm really interested in. I'm trying to think right now as far as my content and my message, who I should be like directing that towards, and if it's worth like going after specific demographics or specific arguments. At the end of the day, like I'm not trying to get people on board with Biden. I'm trying to get people more on board with a long-term plan for progress through the electoral system, through the system that we have. I don't really see any other options as far as that goes. So it's hard when like me personally, I'm just not excited about Biden at all. It's hard to try to sell him specifically. So I talk more about just like incremental change and local politics, stuff like that. I don't know if we'll get any answers here, but it's definitely something I want to be thinking more about as far as messaging and winning people over. So let's see what they have to say.
Kind of go blind when we go live like this, but good evening, my friends. We have a wonderful guest joining us today for Live at 5, Lemon Live at 5, Shaniqua McClendon. Shaniqua is the Vice President of Politics for Crooked Media, home to the beloved podcast, Pod Save America, which I watch all the time. She leads Crooked Media's Crooked's politics strategy and civic engagement program, Vote Save America. And she's a perfect voice to weigh in today on what we want to talk about, okay? And that's Joe Biden. We're going to talk about that and young voters, getting them to Pokemon Go. I don't know if you guys remember that, to the polls. Shaniqua, welcome. How you doing?
Cringe.
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
It's an honor, indeed. I'm so impressed by you. I've been aware of you for some time, and then I saw you on the pod, and I said, wow, she's available. She does things. I didn't know
Always
that.
Available.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you're here. What's on your mind? I'm going to tell you, this is what I want to talk to you about. I want to talk about Biden's path to victory in November. I want to talk about young voter mobilization, all of which is right up your alley, and then Crooked Media and Vote Save America, okay?
That sounds great.
Okay. What do you say we start with this poll, this thing, you know what I'm talking about, the infamous New York Times, CNN poll, and the one that specifically I want to hone in on the facts, what it shows, right? In fact, what it shows. And it shows that Biden is close to tied among voters under 30, a group that Democrats have carried by at least 18 points in every election since 2004. The question is, what do you think? The methodologies have been questioned. Larry Sabato, of UVA Center for Politics, questioned the methodology. What do you think of this poll? Are you buying it?
So I'm not going to say I don't buy polls because polls are real. I took a lot of statistics between grad school and undergrad, and
I definitely understand people being turned off to Biden, but for it to be like tied with Biden and Trump is insane to me.
They're real, but I always look at polls as just a snapshot in time. My job at Crooked and with Vote Save America is to get people mobilized to achieve an outcome by the time we hit an election. And so I honestly, this is going to sound crazy, so just bear with me. I like when polls scare us a little because that means we can tell people, you saw this poll. Yeah. Do you want this to be the outcome on election day, or do you want to change that? And so I always use polls as a motivating tool to get people to do more. Now, I'm not going to say it like makes me feel good. I mean, Donald Trump is literally on trial right now, and there's like no reason that him and Biden should be this close in the polls. So it does make me nervous, but I don't know. I like to use it as a motivating factor to get people to actually donate more, take action, and remember the feeling they had the day after the election in 2016. And remind them that they do not want to feel that way again.
I
just really hate that thinking, and I just don't see it as being convincing to anyone. I don't know. I think the only people that it's going to motivate is people who are already going to be voting for him,
Say I was at GLAAD last weekend, their annual gala and award ceremony, and the head of GLAAD, Sarah Kate Ellis, said, and when you wake up the day after election day and the headline says the winner of the election is, I want you to imagine now how you're going to feel about that. And I thought that was a really great way of putting it. Just so you know, Shaniqua, this is our 5 o'clock live show that we do because I want to have some connection with our subscribers and our viewers. So we came up with this thing just to do it live and talk to our subscribers and hear what they have to say. And we take some of their questions from our chat, and we put up polls, and sometimes, so we may ask you some questions from our audience. So we're glad that you're here today to do that. But listen, even if this New York Times CNN poll, even if it's off, right? Even if the figures are off somewhat, Trump does seem to have made some inroads, especially among young voters and even among voters of color. Why do you think that is?
So I'm not fully convinced that I think there are young people who are frustrated with Biden. That's pretty plain as day to anyone who's paying attention. I'm not yet convinced that these young people are going to show up on election day and vote for Donald Trump. I think the question is whether or not they show up. And if they show up, will they continue? We've seen across the country these uncommitted votes in the primary. And if we'll just see people not vote for anyone at the top of the ticket, it's just really hard for me to believe that Trump is appealing to young people. Young people care about reproductive rights. They care about housing. Now, that's something neither of the campaigns have really put a ton out on. But Trump hasn't offered anything that's actually appealing to most young people. Now, we do have parts of our society, and I think this is at any age, but we're seeing it more with younger people, particularly younger men, where they are trying to find where they fit into society. And Trump does, unfortunately, offer a narrative that can be attractive to people who have not found kind of where they fit into society. And something I think Democrats are becoming more aware of now, but definitely need to make more progress on, is talking about where men fit into society, especially young men. Society has changed a lot, and we've made a lot of gains for women, but those gains don't have to be mutually exclusive to making sure that, half of our society or half of our country is not getting the things that they need to be successful. And so we have to figure out a message, and more than a message, an actual plan to make sure people are getting what they need. But I'm still not convinced that young people are going to show up and vote for Trump equally as they vote for Biden.
This is a poll that we're going to put up. We just put up now. It says, do you think Trump is actually making inroads with young people? Do you think Trump is actually making inroads with young people? Yes, no, I'm not sure. So make sure you vote on that, and then I'll read the results to you and to Shaniqua here. So Gino Maynard says, Shaniqua, the arrogance of youth. What is going on? Wappy69 says, I don't want to even think that could happen again. That's wrong. What's wrong with this generation? And why are they even sympathizing with that orange person? So, I don't like to chastise young people because I don't know if anything is wrong with them, but maybe something is wrong with the Biden administration and with their election committee and what they're doing. I don't know. What do you make?
Yeah, it's just there's so many boomers that are just like, I don't know. They're just out of touch,
Look at that.
I
don't like telling people that they're stupid or something's wrong.
No, everyone's entitled to their feelings. I was watching an interview the other day, and there was some commentary around young people and young voters. They have less experience and insight than people who have been on this earth longer. And so they are operating with the information that they have. And we all have been younger, and we were operating with the information that we have. And I think, the protests we're seeing, there's a lot of discovery that happens when you are young and you start to engage in politics. I was someone who, when I was younger, I didn't think anything was good enough. I didn't think we were progressive enough on anything. And I always wanted us to go further. And the first president I voted for was Barack Obama. And after he kind of got settled in, I felt like he wasn't doing enough. But as I got older, I still definitely have my critiques of that administration, but I grew a greater appreciation for the constraints he faced. Not only having, he didn't always have a Congress that wanted to work with him. He didn't always have Democrats in control of one or both chambers. But also, realistically in this country, as the first Black president, you're going to have some constraints of what you can do as a Black Democrat versus, a Bill Clinton or even a Joe Biden and what he's able to do without getting the extra commentary because of what his identity is. So I say all that to say, similar to you, I don't want to chastise young people. They're operating with the information they have. Now,
there's a lot of truth to that. I was very similar when I was younger, and I was much more of like a libertarian and even like an anarchist at some points in my early life. And just had very much like pipe dream ideas about the third parties, being able to be viable. And I think a lot of the young people they're smart politically, like they understand issues, but they are very emotionally driven. We saw a lot of energy around Bernie, and then that just fizzled out. We see a lot of energy around protests, around BLM, that fizzled out. We didn't really get any long-term progress on that. And so I feel like every 4 years, it's just kind of an emotional reaction as to their strategy. And they're just like waiting for one person to come along to change things. And that's just never how it's going to be. Progress has looked like in the past and will look like in the future. A lot of people working tirelessly behind the scenes to get things done for their whole lives, buckling down and doing the hard work. It's going to look like incremental change. It's going to look like voting for the lesser of two evils, for the weaker adversary that is easier to be pushed in the right direction. And the fact of the matter is if we don't do that, the right is going to. The right understands that, and they are doing everything they can to get power. They are organized, and they have been for decades. And so I just, people have this like evangelical like rapture idea of change, that there's going to be like this flashpoint or this moment in time or this one candidate or this time where like revolution happens and like all the people's minds change. And that's just not how it's going to be. It's going to be long. It's going to be slow. It's going to be over generations that change takes place. And it's not going to be helped by people who are fickle, wishy-washy, don't really have a long-term vision for what they want to get done. And so there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of energy with young people, and then a lot of older people, the passion, energy is not there so much. They are content for maybe less and less incremental change. They are content for more of the status quo. And there's got to be a way to marry those two, to give more energy to the older generations and to those who understand the importance of incremental change and long-term goals. And there's got to be a way to marry that with the energy of the young people to assist in achieving those goals. Because right now, we're kind of working against each other.
Other side with the Biden campaign, it does feel like there's a little, oh, they're young, they don't know. Mm-hmm. And whether that's true or not, that is a really risky thing to kind of wag your finger at young people, especially, with the war between Israel and Hamas. I think a lot of young people don't feel like they're being listened to. And just because they're younger and they've had different experiences and are still growing in their experiences doesn't mean that we should not listen to them. I think young people who are less affected by the world and I just think sometimes their moral compass is a little clearer than those of us who may have been jaded with all that we've seen. And so I don't think we should diminish what they're saying. And I do think the Biden administration needs to listen to them. And then the last thing I'll say, I know I brought up housing already. I don't know why housing is not more central to this campaign. That is something that's affecting everyone. It's especially affecting young people. I mean, I'm 36. I don't know when I'll buy a house. And so I think it's a really easy thing that the administration could bring more attention to. And,
Shaniqua, say that again. You're how old and what?
I'm 36 and I don't know when I'm going to buy a house. I'm saving right now, but we'll see.
But honestly, why is that? Is it because the price of admission is too high?
Two things. My student loans, I send a lot of money to that. And so that slows down the savings I can do to purchase a home. And then homes are expensive. I live in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, but look at what the Biden administration did with student loans. I mean, shouldn't that be attractive to young people?
It is. I don't want to diminish that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good things that he's done on the economy, and the numbers on the economy are good. But there's just a lot of groups within America right now that are not feeling the effects of that, economy going in the right direction. I think like over the next couple of months, over the next couple of years, or not even years, but like the next, through this year, I think that we will see more and more people start to feel the effects of this economy that is good on paper and that a lot of people are feeling. But right now they're just not. And I don't think that the Democrats or Biden administration is addressing that properly. We just saw that one interview where Biden said that like people have the money to spend, but everything is more expensive now. And that's just like a kind of an out of touch sentiment, I think. I think it's hard for them to see the numbers that are coming out about the economy and be able to connect that with people still not really feeling the effects of that and large sectors of the economy that are still not doing great.
That's my personal experience.
Right.
And that's my personal experience.
Okay.
But there are a lot of people who have benefited from student loan forgiveness in various ways. I think the attack on student loans and Biden hasn't done anything is unfair. I think he tried to do what he set out to do from his campaign promises, and the Supreme Court ruled against him with being able to do that. So he's been using other avenues, executive powers he has to forgive a lot of student loans. So that's not something I'm knocking him on. All I'm saying is it is hard to save because I do have that expense. And other people have other expenses. And if housing was made more accessible, I do think that that would help out tremendously with young people.
That goes into the next question I'm going to ask you, but I do have to say, look, you used to be able to get a job when you're young in your 20s and stay there until you retire, right? And you can't, that doesn't happen a lot anymore. Young people are dealing with gig economies. The gig economy, they have more than one job in order to make ends meet. Rent is up. Getting a loan is difficult. Housing prices are up. But I do want to tell everyone before we get to that, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you hit the thumbs up. It's very important for the algorithm. We want people watching independent media like me and like the folks over at Pod Save America and Shaniqua McClendon is. Shaniqua McClendon is joining us now from Pod Save America, from Crooked Media, and we appreciate her joining. Shaniqua, when we talk about things like this, especially when it feels like we're being down on Joe Biden, people get mad. Our subscribers get upset. They're like, this is depressing. We don't want to hear it. But what we're trying to do is actually help. We're not coming down on Joe Biden.
Yeah, people have to get rid of this idea that you can't criticize the president. Like, that is a core tenet of our democracy. Protesting, pushing our representatives the way we want them to go. We elect them to represent us. And if they're not representing us well, we need to make that clear. My feeling is that we are electing a weaker adversary out of the choice between two adversaries. And the election is not about choosing someone who is going to lead us towards progress, who is going to pick up the torch and lead us in the right direction. It's about picking who is able to most effectively be pressured. And then the rest of our time is spent putting that pressure on them. Because if we're not doing that, we're not going to get the progress we want. Voting is essential to that, because you can do all that. You can do the pressuring, you can do the organizing, you can do the direct action, you can do all that. It's not going to mean a damn thing if the people in office aren't at least somewhat open to public demands. And Biden has shown himself to be much more open to pressure from the left than Trump ever was or ever will be. And so that's just the entirety of the analysis for me when it comes to deciding to vote for Biden. There's no progress. There is no productivity in voting third party or in using your vote as a protest. Yeah.
As I have said, I could not say this when I was in corporate media. I could not say that I think that Joe Biden is the only candidate in this race that believes in democracy. And I believe that's how I'm going to cast my vote. You cast your vote for whomever you want, but I'm going to go with the person who is standing up for democracy. And so I believe that's the right choice. And I don't think that every choice is perfect. So I'm very positive about it. This is information, guys. I'm just informing you. So having said that, Shaniqua, what issues are most important, you think, to young people? You mentioned housing. What are the kitchen table issues? Is it abortion? Is it banning TikTok? What is it?
Now, admittedly, I'm not on TikTok. I see why it is so important. I will say I spend a lot of time on Instagram looking at reels, which are just recycled TikTok videos. So
and it tells me everything I need to know about her. She's a quintessential millennial.
Dog reels to look at.
I know. So I get why people like it. Also, TikTok is a place that a lot of people have, as we talk about economic issues, it's a place where a lot of young people have been able to go and create income for themselves. It's a way that they communicate and connect with each other. So I do think that this is going to be a big issue for them. And also you see, TikTok influencers using this as, it's interesting. They're upset about it, but it's nice to see young people organizing around something that they care about. And again, I don't sit in those briefings. I don't know what the White House and our congressional leaders have seen about TikTok that has made all of them pretty much say that we need to get it, under U.S. control. And so that's why I never want to go out as far as to say, this is crazy, they shouldn't be doing it. But I do think, again, we should listen to young people. And this is one of those issues that's really hard to balance because politically, it's not great. You are literally pissing off a lot of people. And it's not just Gen Z, it's millennials. I mean, a lot of people use TikTok. But if there are actual security threats, then that's something we actually have to take into account. And I do think it would be worth sharing whatever threats could be shared so people can have some context around it. But again, national security issues are not always things that you can just put out in the open. Housing, again, yes, I do think that is a huge issue. People having to move back. Oh, go ahead.
No, go on. Finish your sentence.
After college.
Home after college. Do you think, is a woman's right factor into that for young people?
I think so. I think that is something that's just always it's just going to be there. And I know that there are people who are saying Democrats can't keep relying on abortion as an issue to mobilize people. Mm-hmm. I just don't agree with that. I don't think it's not like, the hot thing of the day. People want to have access to reproductive rights, mm-hmm. especially when you can't afford to live in this country. You don't want to bring, children that you don't think you can take care of. And on top of that, Roe being overturned wasn't the end of it. We've seen laws being passed in states that won't even make exceptions for rape or incest. We've seen what happened in Alabama with the Supreme Court and IVF, the mifepristone case. There's going to keep being more and more restrictions until, I don't know. I don't want to be too pessimistic, but until they say whoever wants to get a woman pregnant, go ahead. She's going to have the baby, So
yeah, it's becoming increasingly clear that this is not just a political football for Republicans. They are serious about banning abortion. They would like to have a federal ban if they could. And so I think there is kind of like this dichotomy between like corporate Democrats using issues to like campaign on, but at the same time, like and then there's like reality, and the reality is that there is a threat to women's health care and women's reproductive care that is very serious. And I think that that is something that Democrats who are running need to take seriously. They need to be very clear about what their plans are to protect women's health. And when they get in, they need to do it. That's going to be what's best for America. That's what's going to be best for the Democratic Party to be successful going forward. That's what needs to happen.
There's no way a generation of young people who are used to having so many freedoms and have watched one literally be taken away and then continue to see it be eroded are just going to turn their head to that.
Well, I mean, the poll, almost 400 of you have voted, and you think that says, do you think Trump is actually making inroads with young people? 16% say yes, 66% say no, 18% say I'm not sure. So most people fall in the no side. They're not believing in these polls. I mean, look, if Larry Sabato is questioning the legitimacy of a poll, then, I take that seriously. I don't think that you can totally discount polls. But I do think that, as you say, they're a snapshot in time, and I think this administration needs to be taking them seriously. Make sure you like and hit the thumbs up, and then I'm going to read some of your questions, some of your comments, and then I'm going to get back to Shaniqua. Academy says, I legit was given my home, otherwise I'd never have one. 54 and on disability since I was 30. Let's see. I have a son who's 32, and he knows he better vote for Biden. We discuss politics, where democracy is going, says M. Beasley. Kyoko says, I had to choose between education or buying a house, Shaniqua. That is real. But Mike Petty says rates are still historically low at 7%. Owning a home has its downside for sure, says Debbie Hagan. That's very interesting to me. And then Jimmy Zimzam says reproductive rights, that's important to them. I'm wondering if you guys don't mind sharing your age in the comments. I wonder how old you are, just so I know if there's some young folks here. PK Harris says, Don, what are you drinking today? I'm drinking a tequila soda. Because
I didn't know we could have cocktails.
Yeah, you can have a cocktail. You can go make yourself a cocktail if you want, but you can't. Well, you can't actually because we don't have a break here. Yeah. So let's talk about. I want to talk now about Vote Save America. Shaniqua McClendon, by the way, is joining us now from Pod Save America, Crooked Media, Vote Save America. Make sure you, if you don't know them, I'm sure you do. They are one of America's #1 podcasts. Make sure you check them out. Okay, so let's talk about Vote Save America. I was reviewing your website just earlier today. You have raised some $56 million for progressive causes and candidates. That's extremely impressive. I'm wondering, how do you best spend that money, Shaniqua? How do you decide whether it's better to allocate it for door knocking campaigns, TV ads, voter registration pushes? A lot is going on. Yeah. And maybe it's going with your gut. I don't know. Maybe there's a science to it.
Yeah. I mean, I consider political decisions to be a little art, a little science, but typically we're operating in the places that most people are. So this year, the battleground Senate races, Montana, Ohio. Now I need to remember all of them. Michigan,
Pennsylvania.
Yes, Pennsylvania. All of the important ones. We're operating in those places, but yes, Nevada too. We make decisions based on where we can have the greatest impact. And for instance, in 2020, we raised a ton of money for Senate candidates, but we always want our audience to know if you are giving your money through one of our campaigns, it is going where it can have the greatest impact. So we had a campaign in 2020 called Get Mitch, and that was our effort to flip the Senate. But we did not have Amy McGrath in that fund. Our actual meaning of Get Mitch was to get him out of the leadership position in the Senate. And eventually, Chuck Schumer was able to take that over. But we knew that Amy McGrath was not going to beat Mitch McConnell. So it did not make sense for us to raise money for her if she didn't have an actual chance of winning. On top of that, she raised a ton of money. She didn't need any money from us. And so that's how we make decisions. It would have been nice if she could beat him, but anyone who's paying attention knows that Mitch McConnell, they like him in Kentucky. They keep reelecting him. So that would not have been a good use of money. In Arizona, when Mark Kelly was running, now that was a competitive race. We were looking to flip a seat there. but he also had a lot of money. So we didn't raise money for him, but we did deploy our volunteers there to knock doors and make calls, because that's where we felt like the best use of our volunteers and donors, in this case, not our donors, but our volunteers' time would be useful. And so we look at each state and try to do an analysis of what makes the most sense. We talk to the campaigns that are running, but we also talk to operatives, grassroots leaders, consultants, and just try to get a full lay of the land.
So really, what matters is you do it depending on where you are and what the needs are. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a one size fits all.
No, and we launched in 2018. So Crooked launched in 2017, Vote Save America launched in 2018. But something that was really important to me was that we not start standing up all these like local chapters that were going to compete with organizations in these states that have been around forever, doing good work, but just didn't have the resources they needed to scale. So we send our volunteers and our money to those organizations. And so we talk to a lot of them. If for some reason we don't agree with the work they're doing, we just won't partner with them. I know that people, especially leaders on the ground, hate when people from national organizations come in and say, hey, this is how you need to do things. If it's not aligned, it's not aligned, and that's fine. They can continue their work. But the groups that we do work with, we provide them with financial resources, we give them volunteers, and we also work them into our content so that they can get more acknowledgement of the work that they're doing.
I wonder how do you raise $56 million? Like that? How do you raise $56 million? You must have, some people with deep pockets, or is it,
these are
$1 here, $20
These are
there?
grassroots donors. Yeah. Yes, that's exactly what it is. I'll share a little. I mean, I don't think this is a secret, but a lot of that money was raised in 2020, and a lot of it came in after Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. Mm-hmm. And that is when I think people probably had, they reflected back to 2016, where we lost a lot with the Supreme Court because Donald Trump won and he was able to appoint so many justices. And I think at that moment when she passed away, people had flashbacks to what it would mean if Trump won again in 2020. How many more justices would he be able to appoint? And the night that she died, I was in LA at the time. It was probably 6 p.m. when the news 6 p.m. Pacific, and $10 million came in that night. And people were just really paying attention. And so I think a few things happened that I think is unique to Crooked. We had our campaign called Get Mitch. The full name of it, which I don't know if people know, is Get Mitch or Die Trying. And so we had like this catchy name out there, and people, they went to it. It would have not looked good for the candidates who were running at that time to start trying to fundraise off of RBG's passing away. Yeah. But people knew we already had the fund, and it didn't look so bad that we were able to fundraise off of that, because it mattered. Like, her dying mattered, even though Trump was still able to replace her for the future seats that came open, it mattered. And so people really pay attention to our stuff, but our content is very accessible. The work that Vote Save America does is very accessible, and it just states plainly like what your money is going to and what we hope to accomplish with it.
Well, it says a lot about you guys and your reach that you can raise $56 million. I asked you guys the age of the folks who are in here. Wow, a lot of people responded. So let me read some. Shaniqua, and then we can. Button Creation says 55. Debbie Hagan 67. Raquel Carter 43. Jay Smirkin 48. Mandy's Candy 41. Ludi Ponce 42. 56 for Creations by me. Let's see, we have some 53-year-olds in here. Clarence Fields 51. 39. Ang 7. Sab is 44. 31 is Keens Dominique. Let's see. Someone in here said they were 106 years old. Now I know you.
Damn, we're in here with a bunch of old people. I feel old. I'm not like super crazy about Don Lemon, but I do like kind of the diversity of people that he's been interviewing, and the kind of more like B-list, C-list kind of people who have good and interesting insight. And it's not just like a sensationalist kind of show like Piers Morgan does, where it's all just like shock value and entertainment value. This is still like very mainstream kind of, but more journalistic, I would say.
I know you lying, Kurt Bond. Hey, are you 106? Come on. If so, I want to see the ID, because I don't believe you. Joanne Leslie said she's, but hey, more. I hope you are 106. Yeah, Joanne Leslie is 87. Mel H says 38. Listen, everyone thinks like young, it's only like, millennials and young people on YouTube. My 80-something-year-old mom has YouTube, and she's on social media, Shaniqua. My friend who's in her 60s is on YouTube. Everyone is on YouTube now, and they're on social media. So there are a lot of people. JD is 33 years old, 72 for Walter Orman. So my question, the reason I'm reading these ages
people of all ages like you, Don.
Yes. So here's the thing. Shaniqua, then how do you reach younger voters compared to older voters? Is there a difference? Do you go on social media? Because a lot of the folks who are in here are older. I can, at my age, I'm a man of a certain age, I'm in my 50s. So how do you reach younger voters?
Yeah, I mean, young people are on YouTube. YouTube is one of, it's just one of those applications that stands the test of time. I remember when I was in college, I was obsessed with YouTube. I don't use it as much anymore, but I would sit on YouTube for hours watching videos. And young people still do that. And especially as people are like cutting the cord from cable, I guess that's already happened. It's not kind of in process. People get a lot of their information from YouTube, but also we are on TikTok, we're on Instagram, we're on Snapchat. Like, you have to go where people are. And, I think about the Biden campaign,
Yeah, even me being like 31, I don't watch any sort of like mainstream news unless there's like a specific interview or like an event happening or something like that, I definitely still read like news articles and stuff, because I, a lot of times I will. There are certain people that I follow. I follow journalists on TikTok and Twitter, stuff like that. A lot of times when I see a story or someone report on a story, like an independent journalist or just a celebrity influencer or whatever, I want to know more about the story. I want to know, I want to read the source for myself, because there is, while people can be, very honest, there's still so much editorializing that goes on in independent spaces, and they're not necessarily valuable just because they're independent. So to that, though, I do spend a lot of my time on YouTube. That is probably where I watch and listen to the majority of the content that I listen to.
Biden signed this bill to ban TikTok, but they're also on TikTok because they know they have to be there if they're going to reach young people. So essentially, you have to go to where they are. Young people are not going to, I doubt they're watching MSNBC or CNN as much as maybe. I don't want to make assumptions about your audience, but I assume they watch CNN at one point, or they wouldn't be over here with you. But you have to meet them where they are.
Listen, I mean, it's no secret when you look at the demographics of cable news, and I think CNN had the younger of most folks, and it was in the 60s. I think my average audience, the average age of the audience, just in general, I think on cable news, it's like in their 60s. I think CNN was in their 60s, and I think my show had the youngest of demographics, and they weren't that young. But thank you for all of you who are supporting independent media online now. Thank you so much.
But yeah, it just goes to show like it's almost like we live in different worlds, people in different generations. People in their 60s, they just have different, they watch different news, they watch different content, they grew up with different things. Even me being in my 30s and being, I guess, I would consider myself pretty tuned in to alternative media and independent media, but still my reality is going to be very different than Zoomers and people like that. It's just very interesting, and I feel like a lot of times people don't take that into consideration, the gaps that we have in reality, honestly, in the way that people view the world, because of the media and the content they consume.
I really appreciate it.
Can I add in one thing about independent media?
Yes.
I would just want to say thank you as well. The media environment is becoming very fractured, and that has its positive and negative sides. I think we're seeing a lot more partisanship and just divisiveness in the country sometimes because of it. But I will say, I guess I'm allowed to say this on here.
You can say whatever you want.
On the right, they have made deep investments in pushing out their propaganda. You have a lot of Ben Shapiro and all of these figures they are making so much money off of it too. And they are incentivized to keep lying and just telling people things that make them feel good, but it's not the truth. And it's really contributing to our society, doing what I feel like is fracturing. So it's really important to have independent media who can also offer the truth. I know that sounds really simple, but especially also as our more traditional media, it has different incentive structures. It's important that we can have honest, open conversations about what's happening and, not be solely driven by dollars.
Yeah, and
it's hard because on the left, you just don't have that a lot. And it's hard to do because in order to the people like the Daily Wire, people like Alex Jones, they have the success they have not because they are being trustworthy and hard-hitting, independent sources of journalism. It's because they're being sensational. It's because they are propagandizing. It's because they are telling people what they want to hear and reinforcing their worldview. And on the left, it's just hard to drum people up around progressive issues. It can be done around far leftism, communism, socialism, selling people the idea of a revolution. And on the left, you have people like Hassan, who I am just like becoming more and more convinced of him doing more harm than good in left spaces, where he is basically just like a capitalist realist at this point, where he understands that nothing that he preaches is ever going to get done, nothing that he wants done is ever going to happen, and so he's just accepting it and just along for the ride to make as much money as possible while selling totally unrealistic solutions to his followers and sharing misinformation and propaganda, self-admittedly propaganda, as well along the way. And the only like positive thing that he really does is raise money for certain causes every once in a while. But, you know, you could be a social democrat and do that. You can be a progressive liberal and do that. You don't need to be a socialist or communist to do that. And so, yeah, it's just frustrating that the kind of independent media on the left is almost as dog shit as the independent media on the right.
Not worry about if the corporate overlords, as I call them, and whether somebody on the board of the corporation doesn't like you said, they're conservative and they think you're liberal, and so they they want to sort of get rid of your voice. Like you can say, or as they can get rid of you for anything. On here, you don't have to worry about being canceled. You can say whatever you want. And if you fuck up, you say, I'm sorry, let's move on, right? Because it's an audience that you have built. So I agree with you, and I think I think that conservatives especially got to these places because of their distrust in traditional media. They got here earlier than centrists and liberals, and so they really have a market advantage in, I think, independent media. And there are very few outlets who can sustain like Crooked Media and some of the folks on the left. It's not that many people, or the Young Turks. It's not that many progressive or centrist or left. So yes, support us, support independent media. Make sure you speak up for us and you come out and you watch us. You have to click those like buttons. You have to subscribe. You have to do the thumbs up. It's important to the algorithm. I'm learning so much after coming from traditional media. So this one is very similar to a previous question, Shaniqua. How do you decide which state or races to focus on? Because I think I heard you on your pod saying that you didn't focus on some local races. You didn't focus on judges or appellate judges or things like that. Yeah, in the past. How do you know who to invest extra heavily in the swing states or in local races? Yada yada yada. How do you do that?
Yeah. So as I said before, the Senate races and the House races, gubernatorial races are pretty. Everyone knows which ones of those are important. But something that I regret about 2020 is, one, we didn't focus on the House enough. We were really focused on the Senate and the White House. And I think that definitely hurt Democrats. In 2020, margin got really small for Democrats. And then ultimately in 2022, we lost the House. And so that is why now our program is not just concentrated on statewide opportunities, but we're looking further down the ballot. But also, when Dobbs was overturned, you see these state legislatures pushing these really crazy laws. And honestly, you see two things. You see conservative legislatures pushing more restrictive laws, but you see more progressive legislatures pushing for more protections for reproductive rights. So it shows you the power that state legislatures have. And so who do you want in charge? And then even with election officials, in 2020, there were people who were elected at the local level who were saying they were not going to certify elections. And the right has invested so much in making sure their people are in these positions. That's why they were even able to make that play in 2020. And so we have to be playing at every level. And the other thing is, down ballot races cost a lot less. They need a lot fewer volunteers, and candidates can actually knock a lot of the doors. And so if we're providing them with the resources they need to just emphasize their impact, they can actually win. You hear this a lot in politics. If you're running for Senate, obviously, as a candidate, you can't knock every door. But the further down the ballot you go, the less those TV ads matter. You probably can't even raise enough for a television ad. And then you need voters to see it 7 times for it to even stick. But if a candidate shows up at their door, tells them about themselves, and then, right there answers any questions they have, that goes a long way. And that really makes a difference in winning these elections. And then finally, sorry. No, I was just going to say, on the state Supreme Court races, again, we saw what happened with Alabama with the IBF decision. But we've just seen around the country, the judiciary is powerful at any level. And so we need to make sure the right people are there. I'm from North Carolina. The court swung back to conservatives, and now they're relitigating stuff that they don't like that the left-leaning justices put in place before they got there. And so if they are, that's not how the law is supposed to work. There's supposed to be precedent, and you leave it alone. But they are willing to do whatever is necessary. So,
Shaniqua, did you see yesterday what happened in Louisiana? They have upheld a new congressional redistricting plan in Louisiana provides for a second majority black district.
Yeah, and that, again, state legislatures get to initially make those decisions about what those maps look like. And fortunately, there was some recourse to sue. But this is the kind of power that state legislatures have. And when a state legislature can make a decision about who's in our U.S. Congress, that means the decisions that they are making ultimately affect all of us, because they've now decided who's voting for and against laws that affect the entire country. That is why, specifically looking at abortion, I just hope that people that live in places like New York and California understand that this district in Louisiana could be the difference between whether we have a national abortion ban or not. And so we have to care about these races all across the country, all up and down the ballot, regardless of where we live.
Okay, so that's what I was going to say. I think that's the advice. I was going to ask you, what advice would you give to young people? And that is just to pay attention. What is the advice?
Yeah, honestly, so, we have, we've been investing in candidates. We have this program called the Anxiety Relief Program, and that is just a recurring donation program where we ask people to donate, make a monthly contribution to us. And then with all the conversations that I mentioned that we have on the ground, we figure out where that money can be most useful. And last month, we made some investments in candidates, but we made investments in a lot of young candidates because Run for Something put out some research recently that showed that young candidates attract young voters. And so if young voters are not excited about who's at the top of the ticket, we got to figure out how we get them to actually show up to the ballot box.
You got 2 older people at the top of the ticket.
Very old people. Wow. But there are a lot of exciting young candidates who are running around the country. So get it, but young candidates, it's hard to raise money. It's hard to get attention. So we're trying to give, especially for down.
Yeah, I feel like this is really important too. Like there's just, I feel like not enough young people who, have like a lot of energy around the issue, have these like really progressive or leftist ideas, and that a lot of them just are not, there's not enough that are willing to really study and learn what it would take to become a congressperson or a senator or even a council person in their local board, who are not willing to do that. And there's just no reason that a leftist or a progressive can't run as a Democrat and be incredibly strategic and tactful to win over the hearts of the people and get in office and get things done. We need more of that. And I think we definitely need younger people in the presidency as well, for sure.
On ballot young people. So we're trying to give them the resources that they need to bring young people out. Our hope is that you'll see that up ballot effect where if you're out to vote for someone who's maybe in the state legislature, that you'll just vote all the way up the ticket. I still think there's going to be some work that needs to happen because as we've seen in the primary, there are people who are perfectly fine not voting for anyone at the top of the ticket. But that's a step one in just getting people out the door.
Yeah. Listen, I want to tell the folks who are watching, this may not be the sexiest conversation, but it is I think one of the most important conversations that we've had on this program, because you need to know. And I think Shaniqua is she's telling you things that you need to know and maybe something you haven't thought about. And that's the importance of young people getting out to vote. And that's the importance of older people who may be watching or listening for you to get involved and try to recruit some of the younger folks and just to go out and be energetic about that. And by the way, speaking of, you were talking about being in college. Weren't you an intern in the Obama administration?
At the White House?
Yeah.
Yes, that was, oh my gosh, sorry. I get so excited thinking about it. I mean, President Obama is like why I even work in politics. And it feels full circle to be working at a company that, his staffers founded. But yeah, I was in college in 2008 when he ran, and I went to UNC Chapel Hill, which if you know anything about it, when we won a big basketball game, we rushed Franklin Street. And I remember I voted for him in the primary, even though I thought Hillary would win, was excited when he, won the primary. And when he won the general election, we rushed Franklin Street. It was raining. The police had to come out and shut down the intersection because they didn't know we were going to go out there and do that.
You were like a sports team. You were like Philadelphia fans when the Sixers won.
Pretty much. I mean, you would have thought we beat Duke that day because we were out there just like running around. My boyfriend at the time sent me a link he got from his alumni office about the internship. And I was just like, I'm going to apply. I don't think I'll get it. And then I just kept moving ahead in the process. And I was working at Macy's at the time. And
oh my God, I did that. I used to do holiday relief at Macy's in Herald Square.
It's brutal. Oh, that sounds
when I first moved to New York, that's how I paid the rent.
You got to do what you got to do, but it is not easy work, especially around the holidays. Yeah, people are not nice. But I found out it had to be around the holidays because it was like November. And I remember running around that whole store because I was so excited. And I went to work in the Office of Correspondence, which I was sad about at first because I was like, I'm going to be reading mail all day. That's not cool and exciting. But one of my, one of the interns in my office actually found the letter that the president used to sell the Affordable Care Act because there was this process that you could mark a letter to say, hey, this should be considered for one of the 10 letters that President Obama reads every day. And that was one of the letters. And I was in the student correspondence office. So that actually ended up being fun. Kids are funny. My 2 favorite letters that I remember, one was asking the president why there was so much air in chip bags. And then the other one was asking him if he could get Lindsay Lohan out of jail.
Oh my God. All right, man, that took us back to a time. Let's talk about, congratulations on that. I want to talk about something that also is probably very important to young people. And I'm wondering if it's going to have an effect on the election. And that is the young people in Gaza. Okay. Yeah. And I know you visited the region. This was back in 2017, right? That you wrote about? Okay. And I think it's interesting what you wrote because it really relates to now. So I'll get to that last, but I just want to know, when you were at USC as a fellow, you taught a class about political disruption. You focused on Tea Party, Black Lives Matter, and MAGA to name a few of the movements that you spoke about that you focused on. I want to know, What can your research on those movements tell us about how these young people, these youth protests against the war in Gaza, may influence the November election?
Yeah, I think it's going to have a tremendous impact. Like if I taught this class next year, these protests would definitely be part of it. Right now, I don't think we've seen, so we had 2020, and I'd say those protests, for Democrats at least, I mean, even Republicans were all seemingly on the same side, thinking that George Floyd was murdered, the cops went way too far. But this time, especially on the left, this is creating fractures. And it's, yeah, okay, I'm just going to be a little critical. And I always try to bite my tongue because
you don't have to bite your tongue on this program.
I know it's hard to consume this moment because I think most of us, you think back to 2020, you think back to why Joe Biden ran for president, and he wanted to bring people together. He was someone that, really demonstrated, and I still think now, even in most instances, demonstrates a tremendous amount of compassion for people. And that is really what people were looking for in 2020. And I think it's really hard for people to reconcile that person with someone who, has a pretty muddled policy when tens of thousands of people in Gaza have died. And whenever I hear him talk about all of this, talking about the increased anti-Semitism we've seen in this country, even, it always feels like Palestinians are kind of an afterthought, like something he just has to say because he knows he's supposed to say it. And I think it would go a long way to feel like there was equal concern for the Israeli and Jewish people who suffered the attack on October 7th, and for the Palestinians who, in a lot more significant numbers have been killed, especially because if we can sympathize with innocent Israelis and Jewish people in Israel who were killed, why are we not able to sympathize with innocent Palestinians who are being killed? They did not ask Hamas to execute that attack, and now they're the ones who are suffering for it. And I mean, the policy is just not clear. Like we see this announcement that he has, paused an arms delivery, and then we see another announcement. Now, granted, they did say this was for years in advance, but approving, some arms to go over to Israel. And we're seeing something that, honestly, even when I went to Palestine, I never thought I would see, which is you have congressional leaders saying that we should put conditions on Israeli aid. If at least most of the Democrats, or a good amount of the Democrats, are getting to that point, it seems like the administration should feel like they have some sort of cover. And yeah, I know for me, I'm trying to understand more where they are and why they're there, because we have the leverage, we are providing the resources and the money. And not to, keep talking about the economy, but in an economy where so many people are not feeling the benefits of this better economy that we're in right now, it's hard to see their tax dollars going to something that they fundamentally disagree with. And so to your question about the impact that this will have, I don't think this is going to stop at this election. I think that this is going to fundamentally shift our policies with Israel, and something that feels like it's not being thought about, especially from, Netanyahu, maybe he doesn't care, but even from people in this country who want to support Israel. If you piss the young people off this much, at some point they are going to have these positions of power. And how drastically do you want our relationship with Israel to look? Because if we don't try to handle this better now, I think you're going to push a lot of these young people to a point that when they get into power, they'll just say, we're not helping out at all, figure it out on your own. Yeah. And I don't think that's what, I don't think that's where Joe Biden wants it to be. I don't think a lot of people want to see, an entire country just kind of have to fend for themselves, but it is not okay to have a history of persecution and then turn and, do that to another group.
Well, here's what you say when you write.
I really appreciate that she is able to be honest and say that she doesn't feel like a media trained, I guess you would call them, like the leftists call them, like the blue MAGA or the vote blue no matter who kind of crowd, kind of brand of liberals that I don't vibe with, who just can't offer any sort of criticism of Biden, especially when it comes to Gaza. But yeah, I mean, that's a very reasonable position. A big argument for us, supporting our allies is monetarily is the influence that we can have over them and the soft power that we can have over them. And if it's not a good time to use that, then when is? And I think, unfortunately, Israel and Netanyahu have made it clear that they don't really care if they don't have our support. So, at this time, why would we continue doing that when we were saying, hey, you're not following the rules, so these funds may not come. Like we may stop this, and they say, yeah, we don't care. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. And then, yeah, like the way that Biden talks about like anti-Semitism versus the Palestinians is just very disappointing.
This is what your visit in 2017, and you write, I mean, in great detail about what you saw there, and you were very candid about it. But this paragraph stood out to me. Okay, and it's 2 paragraphs, and it's a little bit long to go with me. You says, as a black woman in America, systemic racism and other forms of oppression affect me every day. But in Palestine, I was just an American. My blackness would never separate me from the actions of my government. But in that moment, I also resolved that none of the historical and present injustices exacted upon black Americans would ever lead me to subjugate others. Jews have faced a long history of persecution and violence too, and the U.S.-Israel alliance should be rooted in assuring the world's Jews have a place that welcomes them and where they are safe. As a black American with no known ancestral or geographical history beyond slavery, I empathize with this purpose deeply, but my resolution stands. And since the alliance promotes the idea that past oppression can justify the oppression of others, it must change. So my question is, if you were the chief of staff to President Joe Biden right now, how would you have him address Netanyahu and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza?
I would say we have to condition the aid, and it needs to be like, the bills that went through Congress with the different aid packages. Honestly, that was the moment to say, I'm not doing this unless I see these changes. The red line was supposed to be invading Rafah, and I don't know if that was really a red line. It doesn't seem like Netanyahu cares much about, he does what he wants. It just seems like Biden has given him too much grace. I don't know if that's the right word, but there's too much trust there. And I don't think that it will benefit Biden in any way, shape, or form. And so what I would say is, like, we have to seriously condition the aid. And I know that is a really scary thing to do. I recognize the threat that Hamas presents, but I think that's also why so many Israeli citizens want Benjamin Netanyahu gone. And so I don't know if it's working around him or what, but we can't just look like we are the ones who will always, we don't have to unconditionally love anyone.
It's also scary too, because like what would Israel do when they don't have that influence over them anymore? If that aid does stop and they're not worried about even pretending to play along anymore, what does that look like? It's just a bad situation all around. It's a bad and complicated situation all around. Yeah.
When it comes to foreign policy, we should be operating in our interest.
I think that Israel should have been pressured much more to push for like ceasefire deals along the way, even if it wasn't like a permanent ceasefire, to have a response after October 7th and then pull back and say, hey, this is a taste of what you can expect. Do you guys want to work something out? Like, Hamas can step down. We don't have to do this. If they continue, okay, which we're going to escalate. Pull back again. Okay, is it, this is how things are going to go. Like, what do you want to do here? Because I think at the end of the day, removing Hamas is a good goal. Is what's best for the Palestinian people. Hamas is terrible for the Palestinian people and is going to get them wiped out. But Israel is all too happy to oblige that.
And I understand that there are interests. Again, I'm not in security briefings. There's stuff that I don't know, but I know that we have the leverage with the resources we send over there. And so there needs to be real efforts to actually demonstrate the power we have. Right now, it just feels like we kind of, we wag our finger and get really stern, but
it's like, what's her name? I'm very disappointed in Susan. What was her name? I can't. Man, I'm having a senior moment. When she'd always said she was, I'm very disappointed in something, and I'm going to send a strong letter to.
Susan Collins.
Susan Collins.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That just took me back to the Kavanaugh.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So listen, thank you for that. And I'm glad you joined us today. Like I said, I thought this was a very sober and smart conversation. I appreciate you sharing your position and your thoughts on Israel Gaza, because it's tough. You can't win in the conversation.
No,
it's not a winnable conversation, but it's an important one to have, I think.
If I'm honest, I didn't even share. I normally will share my work pretty widely on social media. And that was one that I didn't, because I was nervous. And I wrote it juxtaposed to race here.
Wait. What were you nervous about?
I didn't know what the response would be.
Are you afraid of being called an anti-Semite or?
Um, I don't know if I thought specifically that someone would say I was being anti-Semitic, but I mean, even as you read those two paragraphs back to me, I remember thinking I have to cover every base to make sure that people know that I'm not, saying anything because I don't like Jewish people or something. I wanted to make it clear that one, I was separating the people from the government, which also was what I was trying to make the case for here, that state violence is not okay.
Were you afraid of being called a colonizer as well by saying that, Israel should, because I mean, like I said, it's not winnable. You get called both.
Yeah. There's not really much. I mean, yeah, even I looked in the comments of stuff people say about, our platform. And I remember looking at the comments on one of our social media posts, and the first person said that we were like, basically apologists for Netanyahu. And then the second comment said that we were being anti-Semitic. And so you're right.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that like, I think you should just share your opinion and let the cards fall where they may, because there's almost nothing that you can say on the issue that is not going to upset somebody. Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that like I can tell that she feels a lot of anxiety about going outside of what would be like a normal media trained buttoned up kind of response that doesn't really take a hardline position on anything. And even this was still pretty mild, but like I think that it was very admirable of her to speak her mind and say things that are going to make some 60-year-old Democrats upset. But they need to hear it. They do. They need to get off their high horse sometimes and listen to younger people. And younger people need to listen to the older people sometimes too.
You can't win, but it's kind of what I hit on there. Like something that really came through to me while I was in Palestine, there were a lot of my classmates who were trying to project their understanding of inequality and saying, this is what Palestinians should want. And it was very clear to me that they were responding back and saying, no, this is what we think should happen. Mm-hmm. And you can't, project your understanding of inequality, especially a bunch of like white Harvard students, on oppressed people. And so I didn't want to do that. But I also knew that those 10 days did not give me a full understanding of every intricacy. And so I just really didn't want to get anything wrong. Yeah. But in 2021, was that in 21 or 22 when I wrote that? Whenever I wrote it, there was increased violence happening in the region. And I went back and looked at my notes, and I took so many notes while I was there. And one of them was a quote from one of the Palestinian people who spoke to us. And he said, when you go back, will you just take your souvenirs or will you tell our story? And that when I read that in my notes, I said, okay, it's time for me to write this.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to end. Thank you so much, Shaniqua McClendon. She is the Vice President of Politics for Crooked Media, home of the beloved podcast Pod Save America. She leads Crooked Media's political strategy and civic engagement program, Vote Save America, and she is the perfect voice to weigh in on these subjects. I really thank you for informing us today. I hope that you become a subscriber and a viewer of our program, Shaniqua, and go back and tell all the folks over at Crooked Media that we have an admiration for them as well and give them our best wishes. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So the folks who are still here, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you check out the folks at Pod Save America and Crooked Media, and make sure you hit the thumbs up for us. And join us tomorrow. All
right. That was not super helpful, but I appreciated that. I do feel like probably for organizations like this, I feel like the really big focus being like in swing states and then also like on local elections is important. I feel like I'm getting the sense that like the more and more that we can get people to vote for and to run for increasingly progressive people at local levels, at the congressional and Senate level as well, who are actually going to get things done and to represent people in the way that they want to be represented. And as we start to see progress come from that, I think that will carry over into people wanting to vote more progressive for the executive branch. And yeah, I think getting people more excited, more educated on local elections is important. And then yeah, I mean, it's just hard to know how to because I feel like so many different demographics take like a totally different approach as far as like winning them over. And just where I'm at right now, I feel like the only thing that I can do for the most part is just compare and contrast the differences between Trump and Biden and Democrats and Republicans, and just be honest with the fact that, you know, one of those two sides is going to be the one leading our country for the foreseeable future. And, you know, how we engage with that is going to determine the direction we go. And if you ever want third parties to be a viable option, we're going to have to get people in office who are willing to change laws around that to make it viable. And I'm not convinced that a multi-party system in the U.S. is what's going to fix our issues at all. I just feel like so many people are like, again, have this like evangelical rapture ideology around political change, that they're just someday they're going to get their ideal candidate in place and everything is going to change, and that's just not how it's going to be. So yeah, I'm going to keep thinking about and studying on the best way to put message out around the election. I don't really know still the best way to do that, but just in the meantime, just keep talking about it, keep comparing and contrasting the two parties, the two candidates, and what happens, I guess. Yeah, if you want, subscribe to Don Lemon. He has some pretty interesting interviews here and there. Check out Vote Save America. I just checked their website, and it was very well put together, very informative. Probably going to spend a little bit more time on that. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.